stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone, to the February EAC meeting. Just real quick, a couple of housekeeping things. Does anybody have comments or changes on the minutes that Jim prepared? Thanks for doing that, Jim.
You're welcome.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
And a second.
Second.
All right, so approved. Any announcements real quick before we get to our speakers? All right. So we have a couple of interns from the Conservancy to present to us. Welcome. We're excited to hear what you had to say about recycling. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Before we start, I would like to give some thanks to some people that have really helped us. So, Mrs. Winters and Mrs. Grobel, who isn't here, and Mrs. Laura Luker. I want to thank them for making this great opportunity possible. I also would like to thank the Radnor Conservancy and the League of Women Voters for providing this opportunity. And I also want to thank Sophie for working with me for the past several months. So,
Can I interrupt real quick? Would you guys mind introducing yourselves with your names and you know, sort of a little bit of background just to kind of give folks some framing?
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah, so,
Speak up just a little bit. Just speak a little louder.
okay. So, I'm Niles Huang, and I'm a senior at Radnor High School.
Hi, I'm Sophie Samha. I'm also a senior at Radnor, and we did this internship with the Radnor Conservancy and the League of Women Voters. Yeah.
So, as Sophie was saying, we did this internship for the past summer, and towards the beginning, we weren't really too sure what we were doing. I mean, like, we didn't know too much about recycling other than the normal, like the basics. But we knew where we were going, and we basically had 3 goals. Namely, we wanted to first find out what policies Radnor currently has in terms of recycling. So, like how are things recycled and what happened to the recyclables. After that, we wanted to know where the biggest problems in recycling lie, and so we want to reach out to people and ask them what they want to see most improved about recycling. And lastly, and probably most importantly, we want to know how we and how the township could encourage more people and more businesses to recycle.
So before we dug into our research, we found out that the trash that Radnor produces goes to the Covanta Trash to Steam plant in Chester. So we went along with Mrs. Winters to take a tour there. We had a lot of misconceptions about trash initially. We didn't realize that the facility would be not, as we had thought earlier, not necessarily so not environmentally friendly. It in fact had a lot of practices that were they had like best management practices in place, such as trying to reduce emissions, and the trash produced there was incinerated to produce energy.
After visiting Covanta, we wanted to start focusing on recycling. So we did a little research, and we found out that Radnor sends its municipal recycling to a material recovery facility in King of Prussia run by Republic Services. So we arranged a tour there, and we visited the site. And we found it very enlightening. We had come into the tour with a lot of questions and like we had a lot of confusion over what we had read about recycling, and we wanted to get some things straight. For example, one of the points I talked about earlier was what are some of the biggest problems with recycling. And as you can see, there's a pretty big problem. 15% of recycled waste that Republic Services receives has to be discarded as garbage because of incorrect recycling practices. It turned out that the biggest factor for this is plastic bags, because plastic bags can get caught into machinery, especially like rotating pieces, and as a result, the machinery gets jammed, and the whole plant has to stop so that people can remove the bags. And as a result of this, recycling workers don't even bother to recycle plastic bags. So, like, suppose that a truck comes in with a pile to unload a new pile of recycling. If a recycling worker sees a plastic bag, they're not going to recycle that load because they don't want to risk stopping the whole plant. So instead, they just throw it away. And well, it turns out that they send it to Covanta at a cost, of course. So combining all these things together, you can see that when people don't recycle correctly, this results in Republic having to pay more money. And that means that the township has to pay more money to get rid of this waste.
So as Niles said, we went to the facility with a lot of questions, and a lot of them we had compiled from just talking to Radnor citizens in general. The biggest questions that we had were concerning water bottles and wax-coated cartons, such as milk and ice cream. These are just specific things that we found out when we went to talk to the manager there. So just some interesting things are that for water bottles, many people think that you have to crush the water bottles and take the labels off. And we found out that, in fact, you do not have to do that. You can just, they in fact like it if you keep the water bottle in its full form because because when the water bottle goes through the machinery, it'll be identified as a water bottle if it's in its full form, and then they can properly sort it. But if it's not, then they can't do that. And the other thing is that labels can stay on because the water bottles are subsequently sent to another facility where they will remove labels. And the final thing is caps. Many people think you can't recycle caps, and you can, but you have to remove them from the water bottle before you do so, because if they are attached to the water bottle upon arriving at the facility, when they are sorted, the caps could fly off and injure recycling workers. And another point of confusion has been, like I said, about milk and ice cream cartons, because over the years, it has gone back and forth about whether these can be recycled. But when we went, he said, as of right now, Republic will take milk and ice cream cartons.
Well, everything we've talked about so far has been mostly about the actual details when it comes to recycling. So, like where it goes and what should or shouldn't be recycled. But equally important is getting people to know that recycling is good, because there isn't really much point about recycling if no one does it. And one of the big misconceptions is that a lot of people think that recycling is it may be environmental, but it might not benefit them. And some of the most obvious benefits of recycling is that it conserves resources, and it reduces pollution in the environment. But oftentimes people might think of it as recycling as giving back to some sort of intangible, like the world, giving back to the world, as opposed to something that they can feel or like gain from. But turns out that recycling has it can directly benefit the people who practice it. Economic reasons. Recycling is cheaper than garbage disposal, and the recyclables are sold to manufacture new goods. So the profit that recycling gets that helps to further decrease the recycling fee. And this last point about business doesn't really apply as much to residential recycling, but more to business, of course. So if a business recycles, that can help build a good relationship with customers, especially those who are more environmentally conscious, because then it'll give businesses a reputation of being eco-friendly, and that helps business. As well as that, recycling can also get rid of clutter. So if a manager has a lot of shredded paper or whatnot, they can recycle it, and it makes everything look a lot cleaner.
So I don't know if we have time to show this video right now, but over the summer we made a video. We have time? Okay. So we made a video just outlining specific things you can recycle with a couple interesting facts we learned at Republic, and we distributed this to Radnor to hope to get some better understanding. Thanks.
So in the slide previous to the video, I briefly alluded to a business part, a business aspect. And for most of our research pertained to the residential side of recycling, but we also wanted to look a little bit into how businesses recycle, because businesses are a huge part of the community, and they can have a huge impact on recycling. So in order to find out more about business recycling, we wrote up a survey to the Wayne Business Association, which is a group of local business owners, and we basically asked them what they want to see, what their biggest problems with recycling were, and what they wanted to see improved. And two of the big points that that they told us were the misuse of recycling bins, which so that's like people throwing away garbage and things that can't be recycled in recycling bins, because that usually recycling companies don't really want to take the recycling bins if there's too much trash in them. As well as this, many businesses expressed a desire for more options for disposal of specialty items. So things that normally that can't be recycled by normal means, but have special collection events. So things like ink toners or batteries, for example.
And so this whole summer we learned a lot about recycling and how it can be improved in Radnor. And looking forward, we want to better inform just Radnor citizens in general about recycling. Because like I said earlier, a lot of people who I talked to, they are interested in recycling, they just had a lot of questions about what they had to do. So we hope that we can improve that by, we gave a handout to you and the video that we can, that has been distributed to Radnor citizens, so that they will know that they know the benefits of recycling that aren't necessarily just environmental, but also economic. And also we wanted to take a look at recycling in the schools, because that's where a lot of Radnor students who might be environmentally conscious are interested in improving the recycling there. And if we educate this generation of Radnor students, then they can improve Radnor recycling in the future. And so we just in general wanted to see what we could do to learn more about recycling so that we can better educate people and help Radnor make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Niles and Sophie. Great presentation, and thanks for doing the work on this. It's been really informative for me. I know we've had a lot of debates in our house about what can be recycled and what can't, and this opened my eyes a little bit. I certainly learned something, and it really strikes me how much things have changed over the years, and how there are probably a lot of us out there that just don't know, what the options are and what we can do. In terms of distribution of your video, would you guys be open to our posting it on the Township website or something like that, or have you thought about other ways of getting it out there?
Yeah. Anyway.
Make sure you talk into the mic if you don't mind. Thanks.
Yeah, we're fine with you posting.
You guys
it.
are okay with that? Thank you.
I mean, you should spread the word as much as you can.
I appreciate that, and we've had discussions here about trying to come up with some educational materials that we could share. You guys have done it for us, so it seems like a no-brainer to try to get it out there a little bit more. And I think it's a great start. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I had a question for you. You're too young to remember when we used to separate the paper and the recycling in different cans, and they'd pick the paper up with one truck and they'd pick the recycling up with another truck. What's your impression after all your research on the pros or cons of the commingling paper and paper and aluminum, et cetera?
So when we went to Republic, and we also talked to Radnor Public Works about that because a lot of people still think that they need to separate everything. When we talked to them, they said that it is more economically beneficial to separate things, but people are less inclined to recycle if they have to take the time to separate things. So it's thus easier for Radnor citizens to recycle if they just can put everything together.
Yeah, and
I guess I know it's easier, but I meant is the net impact on the recycling stream degraded because they're commingled? Is it less salvaged or salvageable paper because it's mingled with cans and bottles and things?
well, we didn't have any data for that, but I remember that I did sit down with Cheryl Tumola, who founded the Radnor recycling program. So he gave me a little synopsis of the history of recycling in Radnor, and I think that single stream is, although it may not be as efficient, I think in terms of convenience, I think the benefits outweigh the disadvantages, because if it's just single stream, then a lot of people, that makes it recycling a lot easier for a lot of people, so a lot more people will go out and recycle.
Well, we old people still have 2 cans, and if you wanted to go back, I'd do it.
Well, I think there are collection bins in the near the Township building, right?
The township used to have bottle bins in the parking lot here, and you had to put green glass in one, clear in another, and brown in a third.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Could, Radnor puts out a quarterly publication. This would be great to insert it in there because I know I'm guilty of a few of those, and I didn't realize that I was doing it wrong, especially my pizza boxes. So this would be great, and maybe that's an easy way to insert it and get it out to the township because they publish that magazine anyhow.
Yeah, we can send it to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
If you could just let us know who the contact, is it Jim Doling still, or no?
Jim Doling has already received that to be put in the next newsletter, and I've worked with Jim on that, and hopefully he will also get the video up. He's been very useful. One of the things that we've been trying to do is if we could find a way to get a sponsor, perhaps, to have those do's and don'ts put on a door hanger so that they could be actually put on people's doorknobs. As a way, particularly for rental properties and for students who come and go and may not keep something like that on their refrigerator.
Great idea.
Okay. So the one more thing is that a lot of the items that we had on the you can't recycle. If you go on the Delaware County website, they have a PDF of a whole bunch of drop-off facilities where you can put things that can't necessarily be recycled, just in the normal stream, such as batteries, toner, and so, yeah, that's one thing that I think people should be aware of. Yeah.
Trash bags and giant.
You can do it.
Yeah, and so in the presentation we talked about trash bags being one of the biggest problems about recycling. So going off of what Sophie said about drop-off sites, we encourage any watchers and the township to any to Radnor citizens to dispose of garbage or shopping bags, plastic bags, at your local grocery, like your Giants or Wegmans.
Good stuff. Thank you. Roberta?
There's one member of the League of Women Voters who would be very upset with me if I didn't mention Moms, which recycles many things that Radnor does not recycle, and it's local, it's in Bryn Mawr. But Mom's Organic Grocery Store has lines of bins where you can recycle most everything in your house. So if you've missed that opportunity, try it.
It's a great store, too. They have really cool stuff in there. My kids love it.
Maybe they could be the sponsor, because it could drive business to say, hey, if you have these things and you can't recycle them, come to Mom's, and maybe they'd be willing to sponsor something if they could get some traffic driven towards them from it.
I love it. It's a great idea. It might be worth a phone call. Good. All right. Thank you. Any other recycling comments? Go ahead, Gretchen.
And on the back of, I think Sophia Niles had given everyone our last newsletter, and just on the back of it, it gave everyone options of different, if people shop at Whole Foods, Giant, Wawa, Wegmans, Whole Foods, Mom's, there are bins, usually out front, that you can just dispose of your, piles of plastic bags that you get from the grocery store. And, you just have to get in the habit of doing it, and it kind of becomes like second nature.
It feels good, doesn't it? It's such a huge thing. It was not that long ago when we didn't have anything we could do with those bags other than throw them away. It was so depressing.
And I never knew that where all of our recycling goes, they don't recycle the plastic bags. So when we went on this incredible tour to Republic Services, I was heartbroken that those bags ended up in the landfill. And
It's one of those little things. If you don't know that, that's a big deal.
And but I just want to say, guys, you have done such a fabulous job, so thank you. And they have continued. They started the project this summer, and they have continued all year long on this project. So I have a feeling you're going to be working on it, on your way out the door to college. So thank you very much.
That's great. Nice work.
And I just had a question, because I just ran into a business owner today. I'm not going to mention who they are, but I was asking them about recycling, and they said that Republic Services, they thought it was Republic Services, had a couple of dumpsters around the business district for years, I don't know, 5 years, where the business owners could dispose of their recycling. And I guess there were complaints that other people would dump inappropriate stuff in there, or construction materials, and they don't do that anymore. So I was just really surprised that, I was told today that each business owner has to arrange for their own trash and recycling. I didn't know that. Did you guys know? Were you guys aware of that? Yes, okay. So, I just don't know the answer. Do we have any kind of, control over, restaurants? Think about all of, the beer bottles, the wine bottles. Are these just going in the trash?
It's a good question. I certainly don't have the background on that.
Do we have any kind of, I would hope we would have recommendations on.
Well, you'd think if
guiding them in the right direction.
right. If
They
nothing
take
else, they're
care of their
probably
own.
all going to Republic at some point or to some other vendor,
Well,
right?
not if they're going into a dumpster for trash,
Sure, fair enough.
you know?
I think the biggest thing that businesses do that's of a positive benefit is that they segregate their paper. So that there's a paper bin for some of them. I know in King of Prussia, we have one, so. And that makes the paper of a higher utility than the commingling that we're doing residentially.
Yeah.
Well, I think
ahead.
I think for that was one of the questions on our business survey. We want to know what businesses recycled. So like maybe a little more explanation might be needed
Yeah.
for the commercial recycling. So the policy was that it's not that businesses don't have to recycle, but they basically have to implement their own recycling policies. So, like, they can say, we're going to recycle glass and paper and cardboard, but maybe they're not going to recycle something else.
Right.
And we had a survey, and it seems that the majority of businesses, they recycle like metal, glass, and paper. Those tend to be the most recycled items among businesses.
Okay. But that would be interesting to figure out. Does the township mandate that commercial businesses recycle? I don't know if they do or not.
I don't know the answer to that. It's a good
That would
question.
be interesting.
We can certainly look into that and see what we can find out. About the survey, was that an electronic survey?
Yeah, it was just like a survey monkey.
And a couple of things I'm curious about. Have you thought about using that survey again in the future so that you can get a longitudinal picture of how things are going? Obviously, somebody would have to do the analysis, but number two, how did you get contact information to be able to send the survey out? Did you have a directory of businesses in the area?
We contacted I think,
Chris Todd.
Yeah,
from
Chris
the Wayne
Todd.
Businesses.
Okay, super.
So he sent it out, correct?
Gotcha. Okay. Just curious if that's a resource that might be, usable again in the future to kind of keep a pulse. Because it seems to me, as we talk about this, I'm sure the potential for business recycling is probably as big or bigger than the residential one. Maybe. I'm just guessing, but that seems like an important thing to keep tabs on.
I think one of the disclaimers about the survey is that we didn't get too many responses. I guess this is our first time.
Mm-hmm.
We only got 15 responses, but I mean, in the beginning, we weren't even thinking of the survey, so it's more than could have expected.
Fair enough. It's a good pilot.
Like if people are thinking of doing this like in the future, I think some kind of incentive for responses might increase the number of responses.
Like a video or a hanging doorknob thing or something. A recycling bin. Hey, there you go. Oh, that's the other thing. Residents can get a recycling bin if they don't have one, right?
Yeah.
But I guess businesses can. Is that correct? Okay. I'm sorry, Sophie, go ahead.
No, that's right.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you guys very much. Great discussion. Okay, one more.
I just wanted to mention that last week, both of these students went to the Wayne Business Associations and presented the survey results to them.
Oh, super.
And I think they are concerned that they don't have all the options that residential users have. And I think that's an area of outreach that maybe the EAC could do. And I was also going to request it perhaps would be useful in spreading the word if perhaps you might ask the Board of Commissioners if they might take perhaps 5 minutes of one of their public meetings and at least show the video that the students have done to provide guidance to other residents who may not watch the EAC videos but may in fact watch the commissioners meeting.
That's a good idea. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Let's move on. We'll go to work group reports and discussion. Dan, anything on parks?
The Meadow project, we're probably a week or two away from getting plants ordered and then getting them in maybe 6 weeks or so.
Exciting. That's cool.
So we haven't really picked a date for this, but I'm sort of thinking maybe the mid to late April is probably when it would happen.
Okay, super. Any further discussion about what kinds of plants you're going to get?
Yeah, we actually connected with a guy who, I don't know if he works for Jenkins Arboretum, he's somehow connected to Jenkins Arboretum. We reached out to a few landscape architects and him as well, and he kind of jumped right on it and made up a planting plan for us, selected plant species. And we're doing a mix of plugs and seeds, just to keep the price manageable rather than doing all plugs.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the Sustainable PA Community Certification. We've had a little bit of email back and forth on that. I think it's a great idea for us to kind of jump in and help the township, help Jennifer get the form filled out. It doesn't feel to me like a heavy lift, but please, correct me if you think that's not the case. I have a question for you, Colleen. I don't know if you know the answer to this. As we go through that checklist, I think they're mostly saying yes or no on each of those items. How much material do they need to have to back up a claim? Is there a sense of we've got to have, sort of documentation in case there's any kind of audit? I don't think there's an audit process, is there?
But I did look at some other townships, and they had some fairly extensively, a couple of paragraphs explaining what they were doing rather than just checking off the box.
Okay.
And if you can, cite to some code or something, they were okay with that.
Well, and that seems to me like a lot of those things, there's explicit material in the township website, or, we've got stuff in our notes about a program that we've done. I notice a lot of them really intersect with things that we in this group have been involved in, some of which may be a couple of years old, like, for example, the vehicle fleet, greening project, which, that was a very active area of discussion for a while. I'm sure we can dig up the documentation on that, and then I think it's just a matter of, sort of compiling some of that stuff, checking off a few items on the list, and making that available to the township. Is that kind of your sense?
That's my sense.
Okay. So I think, again, some of us have kind of jumped in to break off a piece, and I know not everybody's got time to deal with this, but I think if we kind of take it in little pieces, we can probably be pretty flexible about it and see how long it takes and kind of reassess from there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, super. So I made a Google document available we can use, and I would suggest, those of you that are willing to do a little bit of it, let's just do a little research, see how much we can fill in. We'll regroup next month and see how far we've gotten, and if we need to reassess from there, we can.
Okay. Quick question on that.
Yeah.
If you get in on a certain level, do you have any idea of how difficult it is to attain another level? Because my sense is, like you said, a lot of this stuff is real straightforward. Some of the other stuff would require some more digging. But if we can get maybe check off all the easy stuff, get over the hump of putting the application in, and then later on worry more about the difficult things that would require more township participation, and then bump up the level, like get in there first and then move up.
I think that's a very good way to think about it. Let's do the easy stuff first. We'll probably get to bronze pretty quickly from what I've heard. And then if we want to put in a concerted effort to kind of do some of those harder things. To me, it's more a question of how difficult is it to show that we've already done some of those things. If it's easy, and if we can kind of go back in our minutes and find something, or if we can find something on the website and just tick it off very quickly, that's a quick win. Let's do that and not spend a ton of time trying to.
That would allow us to move through the categories a little quicker too.
And I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right?
Yep.
Let's get the low-hanging fruit first, instead of making it a crazy complicated exercise.
Yeah, because there's a lot.
Yeah,
There's a lot on there.
There is a lot, and I don't think we have to hit all of it by any means. I think we can probably hit, a quarter of it or 50% of it and get pretty far in the process.
Yeah, and I think getting the foot in the door would be a good first step, regardless of the level you end up at, and then worry about moving up later on.
Totally agree. So, yeah, that sounds good to me. Any other comments on that particular topic? Okay, and there's no real deadline on this. It's just really a matter of let's kind of keep making progress. I think this is a worthwhile thing. It's just we got to pace ourselves a little bit. So I didn't have this in the agenda because I didn't know you were going to join us, Ron, but I want to welcome our newest member, Ron Katzman, and ask you to maybe talk about yourself a little bit and your background. That's our usual ritual. We like to haze people and make them feel special.
No problem. So, Ron Katzman, I've known Matt for a while, right?
Yeah.
Basically, had 2 kids that went to Radnor High School. They both finished now, and had some extra time on my hands, so not too much extra time, but so I always had an environmental flair, so I put my hat in the ring and saw there was an opening and applied. They asked me when I was applying, did I have any environmental experience or passion? The answer is not too much. I mean, I did work at Pico Energy for about 8 years and ran a communications network that had batteries that I had to do environmental reporting on and all kinds of toxic stuff, but we didn't have any spills or anything, so very limited. And then now I consult for Business Intelligence Group, so I have a little bit more time when I'm here in town. And I'm glad to be part of the group.
Well, we're glad to have you. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right. Environmental education, the Stream Science program continues. We're taking this month off, and we'll meet again in April, hopefully when the weather gets a little bit better, get out in the streams. And I think Andrea Quinn is going to be running an after-school program in the spring at Ithan. I'm excited about that, and we're going to have our high school interns involved in that again, I think.
Yep.
Jim?
Yeah, I think they're planning on doing older grades this year. I think 2nd through 5th grade was the plan that they came up with.
Yep. And it's the program's evolving a little bit, and
Mhm.
I think that's a good sign.
Yep.
Good, thank you. Any other education-related issues? Okay. Liaison reports. Skip, you got anything for us?
Well, this is secondhand knowledge, and I want to recommend that everybody perhaps take a quick look at YouTube. I was unable to attend the February meeting, but I guess the centerpiece of the discussion was a backyard chicken raising ordinance.
For or against?
The basic premise was to allow it, and we were the Planning Commission got into details such as, do you need some kind of rudimentary certification course and things like that. Subsequently, different people raised issues about avian flu and the possibility of disease from this. And so I would say it's not by any means decided. It's still in the early stage of the process. In a way, I'm surprised we didn't see it over here first or besides. And when I go to the March meeting, I'll mention that if you want it.
Sure, yeah, it'd be interesting to hear about it.
I mean, for thousands of years, or hundreds of years anyway, people raised chickens and we didn't all die, so I don't know.
Well, I'm curious whether the Board of Health has weighed in on this at all. I don't find that particularly concerning. I think the bigger issue is often when you've got really large concentrations of birds. And
Oh, no, there's all sorts of things in the ordinance about limiting it to hens, so you don't have roosters crowing at 6 in the morning.
Mhm.
And, also that you control the population that way, if it's only one sex. I think numerically it was either 6 or 3 was the maximum you could have. So it's not like somebody's going to suddenly do farming.
Right.
I actually had a neighbor who used to have chickens,
Yeah.
but Brucey stopped that.
I mean, it can actually be good for the soil and, presumably, you sort of self.
Well, there are better practices than just, throwing a handful of grain, I guess, in the clutch or hen house or whatever. But I think that the ordinance will cover that somewhat.
Okay. Interesting.
And I apologize, I don't have more detailed information, but I was,
That's all right. Thanks
out
for
of
bringing
town.
it up, yeah.
Okay.
Anything more going on with biomed? Is that?
nothing came up
same
at the
status?
February meeting. There were some minor other plans, but, nothing major.
Okay. Great, thank you, Skip.
I just a quick question on that. So just so I understand, so there's currently is an ordinance that gives some limits on what you can do, but the topic they brought up is, do people need to go through some kind of training class or something to
Well,
add to that?
something other than, it would be a nice idea if I had chickens in the backyard. In other words, I guess they have to know or appear to have learned, the size of the hen house and how many chickens. You don't want somebody just suddenly going out to Lancaster County and buying a rooster and a couple of hens. I guess you'll have to have, in some way, you'll have to be certified as allowed to do that.
So what's the current, is it currently legal to have chickens in Radnor, or is that what's being discussed?
I think it's happened, and I know it's happened because it was next door. I think that this is an attempt to organize it and codify it a little bit more than just saying we're sort of letting it happen.
Okay.
You can have chickens as long as you keep them next to bamboo.
Not the creeping bamboo.
Not the creeping kind, yep. All right, good stuff. Any old business we need to talk about? Yeah, Colin?
Actually, I went to the Radnor Township School Board meeting and mentioned the whole idea of solar panels, and the principal happened to be there. I got in touch with him, and he had me meet one of his contacts at the high school, and they're setting up a student group to get the whole process going, to review it, so it's very exciting.
That's outstanding. Thank you for doing that work. Anything else we can do to help on that?
No, I think the students are going to be really motivated.
Okay, super. I'd love to hear from them if the students want to come back to us and present at some point. That'd be a great way to close the loop.
Okay.
And just to add to that slightly, I know we talked about the tariff issue at the last meeting. Apparently, in one of the papers I read, either the Journal or the New York Times, a lot of the installers have stockpiled foreign panels so that they have their requirements through 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So the tariff will not immediately impact things that much. And the cost per unit is, so much lower than it was 5 years ago.
Interesting point, right. Okay, thank you. Any new business? Any additional public comment? Go ahead.
I just would like to thank the board, the EAC, for their time and listening to the students and supporting their efforts, because they have worked hard and are well deserving of your time that you've provided for us tonight. I would also like to ask, I know you're doing some stream work. I would hope you would, I know I've come before you before and asked about, checking the streams around the developments, particularly around Villanova, but I would hope you would also do that as they develop around the new developments where Wyeth was, so that you can continue to monitor those streams. And in asking questions to Penn Medicine, I have been assured by their individuals that they are in fact monitoring environmental conditions there. While they're monitoring, I'm not sure if that data is being accessible to you or to any other entity within the township. And while it's nice they have the data, I think it's important that it is somewhat transparent so that the public is aware of air quality issues, water quality issues. I know they said there was a oil spill there. I'm sure you're aware of that they are working with the DEP to make sure that that's mitigated properly. But I would hope there would be some oversight other than by the developer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising that. And I'll just clarify something about our stream efforts. It's really primarily educational, and that's focused on elementary school kids. So we're really just teaching them the basics of stream health, and we have some basic testing equipment, but it's really nothing compared to what the DEP is capable of doing.
I think it's important to have baseline data all the time on our streams, and it would be nice, regardless of who is collecting the data, that we have a database where it's kept over time so that we can do longitudinal work. And I know it varies seasonally, but I think as we look at it over the long term, it's very instructive.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And as I'm sure you know too, when the Villanova parking development was done, they did an assessment and found that essentially all of the local streams are impaired to some degree. And it's a really challenging situation because, this is essentially a very urbanized area in many ways, and there are a lot of pressures on those streams to begin with. So finding any kind of difference is a challenge as well. But I think those are really important themes that we need to keep an eye on. So thanks for bringing that into the discussion. Gretchen?
I just wanted to mention a couple of cleanups that we're hosting a vine and invasive cleanup on 318 at Harford Park. from 1 to 4. It's a Sunday. And if you guys, is there any way that, or I just don't know if do you have a database that you kind of reach out to, or how do you?
We do not. I remember talking with Laura at one point about.
we do.
I know
The
you guys
Conservancy
do.
does.
Yeah, we do not have our own database.
Okay.
I think there would probably be support for participating in that. We're talking about sort of a volunteer database,
Okay.
right, to help people.
Even, I mean, I don't know, if the township would, it's township property.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cleanup in the park, so I would assume that, they wouldn't have a problem with, advertising that. But,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's something that you could ask. That would be great. We could always use more volunteers.
What's the date on that one again? I'm sorry.
So March 18th at Harford Park
18, okay.
from 1 to
Harford Park.
4. It's a Sunday,
1
Sunday
to
afternoon,
4
1 to
o'clock.
4.
I'll reach out to Parks and Rec and see
And I
if,
can send you all of the information.
that would be great,
So,
yeah. Be happy
and-
to connect with them.
And then we have another cleanup on April 8th. It's another Sunday at Warren Philippone Park from 1 to 4 also. But I'll send you this
Thank you.
information. And just going along with you had mentioned your stream studies or your programming. We're not hosting this, but we're going to be involved. On April 14th, it's a Saturday morning, the Darby Creek Valley Association does probably 40 stream cleanups throughout the area, kind of where the Darby Creek runs south. And I think Lisa Borowski is the contact person.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be in Skunk Hollow somewhere. And I'll forward you that information. It's either 9 to noon on a Saturday or 10 to noon, but I think it's 9 to noon.
Okay.
So that's April 14th.
That sounds great. Thank you for
Yeah, no
letting us know about that. Yeah, DCVA partnered with us on our stream program as well.
Okay,
And
great.
they're a great organization, and those cleanup events are fun, so I would encourage folks to attend.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Any other issues to discuss? Everybody ready to adjourn? Okay, let's do it. Thanks, everyone.